Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at a game from a little while back. It's Komodo Dragon against Leela Zero from the TCEC Season 25 Division P. I got interviewed by a German newspaper a little while back about AI and chess, and they asked whether engines had basically reached their maximum level already. And well, you know, it is kind of tempting when you see the amazing chess that they play to think that, really, you know, that the differences that you're going to see from now on are going to be quite small. But this game is a very nice example of why actually, yeah, you know, there's still, you know, quite significant things happening in engine chess, and I think, you know, it's pretty clear that we're still, you know, we're still refining chess an awful lot with engines at the moment, because this is an opening selection of Jeroen Nomans, and it was first, you know, played at a big level in season 19 super final between Stockfish and Leela. This may all come as news to Leela's Mr. Fan, Mr. Beads, who has a slight amnesia when it comes to lost superfinals. So in that game, which I analysed quite deeply in Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, it really looked like, you know, basically the opening was just pretty ropey, and Black was always going to be suffering very badly. But then in the season 23 super final, this opening was repeated, and Leela found a new concept and did a much better job, but still, you know, lost that game, and you still felt, well, you know, it's obviously still not really repaired. That was maybe a better concept, but still. But then you come into season 25 and you come into this game, and actually quite a few other games as well. It was part of the Division P book that Jeroen produced. And you see Leela actually holding this game, you know, much more comfortably. And yeah, you know, suddenly the opening actually seems like a pretty interesting choice for Black somehow. You know, you've just moved from season 19 to season 25, and your conception of the opening and the possibilities for Black have really changed quite significantly, you know, with the engines, you know, managing to prove quite different things. So, yeah, you know, I mean, I think it's really, really true that, you know, even though you often don't quite see it in the results, you know, maybe you drew it in 4 or 5 seasons ago and you're still drawing it now. When you actually look at the chess, you know, there's some quite significant changes in understanding going on. And, yeah, the engine's getting better and better, understanding even more, assessing better, finding better plans. You know, it's just going on and on, really. And well, you know, for Silicon Road, I analysed these games, you know, enormously with as many engines as possible. So yeah, just goes to show, you know, in some ways you're really blind until you know, until you step a few months into the future, get a new version of the engine, and it suddenly finds incredible stuff. So let's have a look at this opening. It's a very, very interesting one, in actual fact. It's a Slav, so that's definitely for Mr. Beads as well. And it's a Smyslov system. So it's d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d takes c4, a4, knight a6. And this was the brainchild, also favourite of Vasily Smyslov, ex-world champion. Known for his smooth positional play and peerless positional feeling, but to be honest, he did play a lot of ropey-looking systems as Black. It's but this one is quite interesting in actual fact. So, you know, with the nice advantage of the Slav is that you're threatening to play the move b5 as soon as you grab this c4 pawn. And I mean, this is the Geller gambit. It's quite interesting, but in principle, it's pretty okay for Black. So White plays the move a4 to stop b5, but that weakens the b4 square, and what makes it hard really for White to do very much on the queen side in the future. Very hard to get in b2 to b4. Now what Black normally does is play the move bishop f5, which stops White from occupying the e4 square with a double pawn centre, and after e3, e6 we get these positions. I played these an awful lot as Black, as a chess professional. back in the 90s, and I think I understood them very well, and scored very well with black as well. I also played them from the white side as well. Came up with an awful lot of ideas. So yeah, very very fond of these positions. Smyslov's idea though was somewhat different. He just played the move knight a6, and this knight is aiming for this b4 square, so it's just aiming for that weakness. And Smyslov wasn't afraid of giving white a double pawn centre after e4. The idea being really that obviously with a double pawn centre, white's got more space. That's potential for cramping the black pieces, but since black's got a knight onto b4, an advanced outpost, that where it can't be driven away from, well, that cramping of the black position is maybe not as bad as it might otherwise be. Rather than having a knight on b8 that's stuck, it's on b4. Aiming at some white squares there somehow. So it's an interesting concept. It's probably not the best concept in this position, but well, the engines show that there's an awful lot of stuff that's actually quite reasonable. So bishop g4, bishop c4, and now the move e6, and bishop e3 from white. So just supporting that centre. Bishop a6 is possible, but this is one of Smyslov's discoveries, and quite correct in that as well. That these double pawns are not so bad, really. Why is that? I mean, after all, they look awful. Double pawns here, and also a weak pawn on c6. It's all to do with this move a4. Simply, you've got the b file. And there's no easy way for white to defend this b pawn with a pawn. If the pawn was back on a2, you could play b3, and then there's just no pressure at all. The pawn on b3, or the b pawn is protected by a pawn on a2, and you just get on with your life, and you're going to target those pawns. That's a horrific position for black. But with the pawn on a4, it makes a big difference. Basically you're going to have a bishop or a major piece tied down. Black can start putting pressure. And even the a4 pawn could be a little bit weak as well. So, yeah, this is actually quite good. So that was one of Smyslov's discoveries. After bishop e3, I mean, Smyslov often left the knight on there for longer. Played moves like bishop e7 or whatever. But well, the engine book is knight b4, and to be honest, I think this is what the engines do normally. And now the last move of the book, I believe, and that is the move rook c1. But that's also the major engine move there. It's quite interesting. Why does white play rook c1? Well, because there was one human game here played by the strong player Moisenko, and he just played the move h3 in this position, and we got this position. And well, he actually won the game quite quickly with white, and I was sort of wondering, well, how good bad is this? Black is a bit more cramped, and he's exchanging two sets of minor pieces, so that's actually quite a good thing, really. But on the other hand, by black's exchanging all the pieces that were developed, so the bishop on g4, and now the knight on the queen's knight, which has taken 1, 2, 3 moves to get there, and you're going to exchange it for a piece that's only moved 1. So maybe you're just giving up too much time, but actually the engines think that this is completely equal for black. I'll just show you how the game went. It's not necessarily the best idea. The engines were quite keen on playing fe3 and later e5, but they weren't too worried about that. That's one of those things where I'd sort of say, well, that's the sort of position that I'd really need to spend a little bit of time understanding how to play it, because intuitively I do sort of feel a move like fe, it defends the d4 pawn, it opens the f file. It's making me feel a little nervous somehow, but the engines don't think it's dangerous. So and in the game Moisenko didn't do it, which surprises me a little bit. But he was playing for f4 and f5, which is quite interesting. I mean, you've got this light squared bishop on the a2 g8 diagonal. We'll definitely talk about that one later in the game. So what Moisenko wants to do is just to play f4 to f5 and open up that diagonal, open up the f file in that way, and really target the f7 pawn, but get rid of this e6 pawn by exchanges to increase the scope of the bishop. So I'll just show you where black went completely wrong, because it's kind of interesting. King h1, rook d8, e5, knight d5, bishop takes d5. Yeah, actually the engines were looking at this nice little intermezzo. Bishop c3, bc3 and cd in this way, and then you're going to be able to get rook c8 to attack the pawn, and of course this one's hanging as well. But rook d5 was played, which is not bad. Rook df2, bishop c3, and now c5. Yeah, I mean, the engine's giving all sorts of stuff. f5, ef, rook f6 is also... yeah, the engine's also thought that this was completely fine for black. And to be honest, why not? I mean, these pawns are weak. You don't have that much of an amazing kingside attack. c5 was played, a little bit more risky to do it this way because, yeah, I mean, you're getting full pressure on the f-file. e6 is coming in. But actually, you're still completely okay. Rook f5, rook f5. But here, black made quite surprising and massive blunder. The best move was simply queen c6. d5, queen d6, you just hold it like that, you know, and yeah, you're just going to go f takes e6 next move, so yeah, just no worries at all. Best move for white is to play queen a7, and you just swap everything off, and just going to be a draw there. But black blundered with queen b4, and he must have missed this move, I guess, rook d5. Well, you can't take the pawn on d7 because of rook d8, but on the other hand, you're just going to play rook d8 anyway. So, and this was the end. It's the game Moisenko against Drabka in 2011. Rook d8, and black resigned because after rook d8, you go e8 queen and win. But okay, I mean that was not particularly impressive for white, and well, I mean, basically this idea that's very common in the sort of Queen's Gambit openings. You see it a lot in the Queen's Gambit declined, you know, of exchanging a couple of minor pieces to relieve any sort of cramping in your position, and then just playing normally afterwards. Yeah, quite effective here too. So what the engines do, cutting a long story short, sorry about that, is rook c1 to stop the knight coming into to c2. And now, yeah, some very interesting moments here. So bishop h5 played. Little bit of an odd move. The engines just do that. I mean, white's going to play h3 and g4 anyway, and black's not very keen on exchanging, just giving away the two bishops there. So, but it's just a slightly weird move or the way of doing it. But it's happened in pretty much every game that I've seen with that. So h3 from white to play g4, and now this is a very interesting moment here, because, you know, what is wrong with the simple move castle kingside? You wouldn't really think that there could be something wrong with this move, but it actually gives white an extra possibility that actually Leela exploited against Stockfish in a game. I'm just having a look when exactly it was. Quite an old one, I think. Was it from the Cup? I think it was from the Cup. That's what I'm thinking. Sorry, scrolling round. It was quite a long game. Down, 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 down. It was from the season 17 Cup final, in actual fact. So yeah, you can see how long ago these positions have been played. And well, you're seeing Stockfish move in season 17 playing actually an inaccurate move here as well. Why is it inaccurate? Well, white gets the chance to play the move g4, bishop g6, and now e4 is attacked. You don't want to go e5 because that just weakens all these light squares, you know, connects up bishop and knight. That's what you never want to do. So normally the move that white has to play is knight d2, protecting e4, just allowing f4, f5. I mean, that's not a huge inconvenience, but obviously you're going backwards like this. What Leela sort of pointed out in this position was that knight e5 is possible when black has played castle's kingside. Why is that? Well, if bishop e4, we've got g5, and yeah, the knight cannot defend this bishop on e4. And if you play knight takes e4, we go knight g6, and after knight c3, well, we could even have bc3, but of course we've got the intermezzo knight takes c7, followed by b takes c3 with an extra piece. So, yeah, I mean, Stockfish played c5, and here probably Leela did something a bit inaccurate. Took on g6 already, and then took the pawn on c5, which, well, yeah, Stockfish held it, basically. In my games, I mean, I'm on less good hardware, but I'm assuming somehow that, yeah, like a 2 or 3 year later version of Stockfish is worth more than all that extra hardware. Well, what Stockfish wanted to do actually was just to do this, and the basic idea is that you're not swapping off the knight for that bishop, and you're just going to block it in with f3 and e4. And yeah, I mean, Dragon, Stockfish, they were all winning these positions very, very easily indeed. So now it looks like Leela in season 17 there made a mistake of getting rid of that bishop. Just leave it there, lock it in behind the your pawn chain, and well, just basically play with an extra piece. You know, that's always the risk when you're playing in this line of the Slav, actually, in lots of different variations. Always a big risk. Now, Stowflace actually did something quite funny, really, against slow chess. So Stowflace was black, played the move a6, and there once again you sort of think, well, surely I can just play g4 and knight e5. You haven't stopped this idea of going g5, and of course, as we saw, knight e4, knight g6, knight c3. I don't need to have knight e7 with check because I've just got bc3 attacking that exposed knight on b4. But Stowflace came up with a great idea. Bishop takes e4 in this position. g5, just winning a piece, right? The knight's got to move and then the bishop hangs. No, bishop f5 was what Stowflace played. So, and the key point is, having played a6 rather than castles, is that after g takes f6, you can play g takes f6. And, well, we've got the g file for attack. We're attacking the knight. We've got 2 pawns already, and we're attacking a third here. So after knight g4, we go h5. And, well, actually, slow chess in this position didn't just want to give back knight h2, bishop h3, because, well, you'll also have rook g8 check in there. It's going to be very dangerous. So play the move knight h6, bishop g6. But, well, this position, you know, black's got 2 pawns for the piece, and this knight is not necessarily in great shape on h6. So, I mean, it was a very sharp game, rook e1, king f8. But running my engine games on this Stockfish against Dragon, yeah, these were just all ending in draws. You know, there were no wins whatsoever. So this is slow chess against Stowflace from, oh yeah, from season 25, Division P, funnily enough. So pretty interesting there. Again, Stowflace is always coming up with something a bit crazy and a bit interesting. But what all the other engines wanted to do, Leela, Stockfish, played the move h6. And now you probably understand why we're playing h6 in this position. After g4, bishop g6, knight e5, we can just play bishop takes e4. There's no g5. So, yeah, that would actually just win a pawn. I mean, white's got some compensation with the 2 bishops, but that's fine. So that means that white has to play the move knight d2. It's quite interesting. I mean, it really is. You know, I never really stopped to consider it. It's only when, you know, when you know, sort of drawing up things to analyse for this video that you start thinking, yeah, but wait a minute, why can't I do it there? Why can't I do this? You know, can't I exploit this with white and all of that? And you start to realise that, you know, the move orders that you see the engines playing, you know, you sort of say, oh, yeah, just all normal. You know, actually it's got so much behind it. You know, that's what's always fascinating about, you know, really analysing these engine games and not just, you know, analysing them just carelessly. So castles played by Leela here. Yeah, here you can be a bit flexible with your move orders. You could play the move a6 here as well and then castle later. That doesn't really matter too much. Castles and now f4, and this is the novelty. There was, funnily enough, a human game, not a high rank game at all, but where white played queen e2, but f4 is much more powerful. And to be honest, I mean, this was really one of the things that yeah, you know, when engines started getting strong, even you know, in the, I call it the pre-computer age, but towards the end of my professional career, you know, 98, 99, I mean, you saw that that very often, you know, engines were sort of grabbing space like this, and you know, you were doing all your little cramp maneuvers, and the engines were just grabbing space and trying to squash you. And well, yeah, you know, in those days, obviously, you know, humans were generally stronger than engines running on commodity hardware, and a lot stronger. So you always got away with it. But I wish I'd sort of taken note of you know, of the power of gaining space like that, because I tended to underestimate it as a player in general. And well, you just see that's how modern engines nowadays react. They're simply grabbing space. You don't fight for it; they just grab it and push you off the board like that. Now, yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting to see what the engines do now. Yeah, Leela's got a very specific idea. Wants to actually move this knight round e8 to d6, and there's plenty of advantages to doing that. But yeah, the problem is that if you go knight e8 too early, we go f5, and well, yeah, once you're forced to get rid of this pawn, the knight's not great on d6. So what Leela actually wants to do before playing its plan of knight e8 to d6, that's the new plan that it came up in was it season 23. It wants to play the moves a6 and b5, and I thought actually that was only purely to gain some queenside space, and of course it is to gain a little bit of queenside space. But the big idea, the really biggest idea, is to chase this bishop away from this a2 g8 diagonal, and it just means that when white goes f5, if the bishop's chased away like that, then yeah, when white goes f5, black isn't forced immediately to take on f5 because yeah, there's no bishop anymore pressuring e6. So you might say, well, a6, what about f5? That's a very good question, and funnily enough, well, I asked the question, but also Leela played this as white in my engine games against Stockfish, but Stockfish was not impressed. Yeah, evaluation just dropped to 0.5 after this, but yeah, it's really hanging on the edge. You know, you add a couple of extra moves for white and black, and then this whole plan is not working at all. The plan was ef, gf, and bishop h5 here. So hitting the queen, so we go bishop e2, and you know, you sort of think, well, okay, I don't know, bishop e2, queen e2, we've got a big centre, we're going e5 and f6, you know, surely this is very dangerous. But what Stockfish found was just these incredibly concrete ways of yeah, getting some sort of God, I've forgotten the word. Some sort of concessions. That's the one. Sorry, just been speaking too many other languages recently. So hitting d4. So if you go bishop h5, I go c takes d4. So d5, and then we don't resolve the situation yet. We go queen c7. So if bishop h5, we'd go queen g3 check. Very painful. So king g2, and now we take on e2 and go bishop d6. And yeah, somehow you've managed to sort of stymie this white centre. You've got the e4 pawn as a target, and also plenty of dark squares to play with. It's not super comfortable still. Losing that dark square bishop is a bit of a pain, but it's kind of hard for white to really move out there. And after a move like queen f3, c4 is played, and the knight's coming into d3, and then we're going b5 to b4. Once again, it's not easy at all for black, but the engines were managing to hold this quite nicely. So yeah, I mean, but it's a really precise thing. But just in that precise moment, if white goes f5, we can still exploit the fact that the bishop can come to h5. You know, which again is, yeah, you know, it's you know, it's subtle, right? I mean, the engines are keeping this bishop on g6. They're not playing a move like bishop h7 to anticipate f5. They're keeping it on g6 because they calculate that the bishop h5 is possible under these circumstances. So king h1 played. Now if you go king h8, we'll just go f5 immediately because you know, stuff like this, g takes f5, bishop h5, we go bishop e2. There's no queen c7 or anything like this. You know, your king's out of the way. So yeah, you know, it makes just a huge difference there, basically. You know, what the engines do in this position is they play b5. And the bishop goes back to e2. Okay, so now after f5 we can just leave that tension there, and we don't need to do anything because there's no pressure on e6 anymore. And of course, you know, if the bishop had gone back to b3, that would also give some possibilities of knight d3. So not particularly what white would want. So b5, bishop e2, and now bishop h7. Now the engines move the bishop out of the way, just anticipating f5, because there's no way that the bishop's going to come to h5 with the bishop on e2. f5 here, and Yeah, this was where Leela was in season 19, I think I said, didn't I? It was played the move rook e8. And I mean, Stockfish built up this really powerful attack. Now, actually, Leela actually thought that, and was reasonably successful, that it played all these moves. And yeah, I mean, I go into this in a lot of detail in Silicon Road. I mean, there's some moves like EF5 and GF5 that really shocked me. But in this position, Rook C7 was played by Leela, and looking for Rook D7, just trying to sacrifice the exchange against this. But yeah, I mean, Stockfish played it quite beautifully. This move from Leela really shocked me at the time. You know, in principle, the idea is always you don't move the pawns in front of your own king. But yeah, Leela was trying to punch holes in that centre. But yeah, there was some fantastic play from Stockfish. D5, Bishop D4, an exchange sacrifice, blasting everything open, and Leela's whole position collapsed, basically. Now, yeah, in some games, Leela played the move Queen D7, Rook D8, Queen E7. So somehow this stimulated White to go over to the D file. I'm not quite sure why, but actually Stockfish just seemed to be finding it really hard to build up any more pressure. And yeah, Leela ended up transferring the knight over to B6 and playing knight A4 just to weaken that defense of the E4 pawn. And well, I mean, actually, somehow you can sort of see the difference between that game that Stockfish won in season 19 and this. You know, I mean, somehow Black's managing to keep White at bay somehow. White isn't managing to get the pieces really active there. So yeah, maybe this is also possible, though we'll need some understanding. It's not at all natural, I have to say. I do like the plan that Leela came up with in season 23, and that Leela was playing in season 25 as well then. And quite a few of the other engines as well did this. It's the move knight e8. And what's the beauty about knight e8? Well, this knight is moving round to d6, so you know, the duties in terms of attacking the pawn on e4, they are being maintained. The knight's coming in there, but the key thing is that, you know, White really loses the possibility to play this move g5, open the g file. I mean, the king's gone to h1, the rook could come to g1, you could play g5. I mean, in that game that we saw from season 19, I mean, that's how Stockfish broke through. But yeah, playing the knight round to d6, you know, the bishop is covering here, and what we also get the opportunity to do is to play f6, which will also help to hold g5, but that'll also give us the possibility of getting the light squared bishop into play, Bronstein style, playing a bishop round to h7 and g8. He did this in the Caro-Kann a couple of times. You'll just be able to play the bishop round to g8 after moving the king, play f6, and all of a sudden the bishop's active on the long diagonal. And also bringing the knight into d6, Stockfish made a use of this a couple of times. You've also got the possibility of moving into to c4, you know, and exploiting that. So actually, it's a very fine manoeuvre, I have to say. Yeah, I mean, basically was discovered by later versions of the engines. The ones you know, around season 19 or whatever didn't have any clue about this. So how did White proceed? Well, knight f3 was played, knight d6 and rook g1. There's plenty of ideas that White can play here. I'm not going to go in total detail because that would be a video of hours basically. And yeah, Mr. Beads needs his beauty sleep. Yeah, this was one idea of Leela's. This was a game Leela against Stockfish, which looks frankly terrifying. But yeah, Stockfish had no problems batting this away. I mean, these knights look a little bit odd here, but on the other hand, yeah, you know, they're tying the queen down. They're sort of you know, interacting with this light squared bishop, and if the queen moves away, we get knight b3. So it's kind of hard for White to really get into the black position. I mean, not that I'd feel comfortable defending this, but Stockfish managed to make a pretty good go of this. But I do find that quite a powerful little idea. But Rook g1 was played by Komodo Dragon. It's also one of the main moves. Yeah, knight c4 was played by Stockfish a couple of times, and you know, I really quite like this. Just with the idea of bishop c4, b takes c4. And then we've got knight d3 and then c5, just trying to punch some holes again in the white centre. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this felt sort of natural to me. We're going to play, rook b8 and pressure b2. Yeah, I mean, the engine still thought white was better, but that wasn't too bad. I mean, actually, what I was looking at was to play the move bishop f4 and then queen d2. That's what I wanted. You can tell maybe what I'm teeing up for there. But the engines were not too impressed. Takes. Bishop h6, they just thought knight d3. We just ignore what you're doing over there. And g5, which was another one of my suggestions, they just said ef, and bishop g6, and we'll keep it all together, thank you very much. I mean, still looks incredibly dangerous to me, but yeah, it's kind of looks for the engines. This was actually surviving. So after rook g1, king h8 played, queen f1. Queen f1 actually stops the knight coming into c4 now, so that's quite useful. And now the move f6 from black. And yeah, I mean, black's getting himself nicely organised there. G5 no longer possible. Bishop can come around to g8. Looking good. And we're still following the game Stockfish against Leela from season 23, which was a very impressive win for Stockfish there. So knight h4 played by Komodo Dragon, and now here's the big difference from season 23. In season 23, Leela played the move queen d7, b3, and rook ac8. Was that right? Yeah, queen f3 and then knight f7, and we got this sort of play. Knight g5, knight g6 takes, and e5 d5, and Leela considered this to be pretty even, and Stockfish considered this to be pretty winning, or very, very good anyway. And well, of course, Stockfish ended up proving this. The big problem, I mean, it's quite close calculation somehow. It's really kind of only moves really to make it work. Rook f1. This is, I mean, in principle, as a human player, I'd be rather worried about this, but that's not always anymore such a good indication. I mean, I get very worried about a lot of engine things, and they turn out to be fine. So, anyway, knight d3, gh6, takes. And then this was the key move. I think this was the key move because it's only really one move before that Leela grasped what was happening. But this was the key idea. Queen f1, rook takes b3, and now queen f5. And this exchange of queens, takes, which is more or less forced because of all the weakness on the king's side. Well, it just gives white, actually two massive protected passed pawns. And, well, even black's a pawn up. It doesn't really matter. I mean, white's just going to win all these rook endings. And Stockfish certainly did. So that was kind of the problem. And I mean, in a way, it's quite funny, isn't it? You've got a King's Crusher fawn pawn on g6, which normally Leela, well, certainly, from the good old days, we knew that AlphaZero loved these and Leela loved these too. And somehow Leela just letting it happen. But it just turns out to be absolutely decisive for white. So quite strange in a way that Leela let that happen in that way. And well, that was one of the interesting things because in season 25, Leela played the move Queen E8. So just stopping the knight from coming to G6. And well, Leela's idea is just to play the move Queen F7, put the queen on there, defending G6. It's on this nice diagonal, so you do get a few possibilities where you could, come into b3 or support knight c4, and then otherwise, yeah, Leela will just get the rooks organised, and then a little bit later have a look for something to do. Sometimes you just can play moves like b takes a4 even, and bring the knight round to b5 to attack a d4 pawn, for example. It's I mean, it's better for white, but it's interesting for black. It's confusing and interesting enough that I probably would be very happy playing this position as black, just for the counter chances. So I think Leela's really found a lovely way here of putting a lot of of really finding all the dynamic possibilities for black and the way of defending the king side nicely. Now, Dragon isn't an engine just to sit back and let things happen. I mean, I was looking at all sorts of sensible moves, b3 for example, and queen g2. But yeah, I mean, the engines just weren't really worried about this at all. They were looking also for moves like knight b7 and c5. was all sort of going kind of fine. So what Dragon did was really, turn the board on fire, and maybe this was the reason that previous versions of Leela didn't like this idea, because Dragon was pretty positive about f takes e6, and queen d7 was obviously intended to defend this pawn on e6, because now the tactics get quite crazy. So knight e4 played, taking the pawn back, takes, and well, I mean, the big advantage there is that obviously Black's got that light squared bishop free, but on the other hand, having played the move f6, there's plenty of weak light squares on the Black king side. So it's actually a little bit of a double-edged thing, really, because you've got this bishop free, but now you're going to be very worried if you end up exchanging it. It's going to be very, very worrying indeed, and that's what Dragon tries to do: bishop f3 to exchange, and bishop d3 from Leela. So this is pretty fraught, really, because you've got a bishop sort of only defended by a knight on b4, which is it's not loose, but it's not super strong either somehow. So queen d1, keeping an eye on it, and this is just now it just gets completely bananas, which is why this game I noticed this game in the start. The opening was the first thing, because I really like this opening. But this sequence was really amazing, because essentially Leela decides that there's no possibilities of just sort of waiting. I mean, there's already threats like bishop takes c6 after knight c6, queen takes d3. So there's already concrete tactical threat. So Leela just decides it's the moment to make things happen, before white consolidates, gets too much of a grip on the position. So play the move f5, just opening things up and attacking that knight on h4. And Dragon reacted with g5, and now f4, whack. So attacking the bishop on e3, actually re-establishing contact with the light squares, and that's quite important because this g file is getting opened. And you're attacking the bishop on e3, and you're also pinning this pawn to the knight on h4. Only that's not really that interesting, because we can just play g takes h6, and of course after bishop h4 then hg. Well, what did the engines do here? The only move they wanted to consider was g5, and this is quite incredible actually. In a couple of moves you've moved from Black, where you're saying Black's just going to get attacked here and they're going to get squashed on the king side. Now it's Black expanding on the king side, and White's got to be careful. There are multiple pieces hanging. Black piece is pretty active, so you've got to make sure that you've got to keep on acting reasonably aggressively, otherwise it's going to be could get a little bit awkward here. So I mean, bishop d2 was played, and I think that's the most natural move. I mean, bishop f2 was also, I think Leela was playing this in my games, Dragon certainly as well. Also apparently not a bad move, but for me, bishop d2 is completely natural. I mean, you're just threatening, you've got another piece on prise, and you're threatening bishop b4 and queen takes d3, winning this bishop on d3, so that seems natural. Knight d5, played by Leela, so just getting out of that attack, and this knight is coming back into play. It looked vaguely offside, it was hitting squares, but you weren't really sure what it's doing, but now it's coming back with a vengeance, and targeting some squares and completely impervious on d5. Bishop h5 now, hitting the queen. Queen c8, this looks a little bit awkward for Black, and then queen f3, and hitting the bishop on d3 and getting the queen into the king side there. So here actually on my hardware, Leela went rather wrong in this position, or what Leela was doing doesn't feel very natural. Took on h4, losing that light square bishop, and then queen e6. I mean, you're getting an extra, you're getting a pawn back, but White's got two bishops, pawn h6, chances of going rook g7 at some time. It looked really, really awkward, and Stockfish was winning every single game here. It's the reason there was quite a big discrepancy in score between the engines on my hardware. But in season 25 on TCEC hardware, bishop h7 was played by Leela, and that feels much, much better. So rook ce1, quite a yeah, in some ways feels odd to abandon the attack on the c6 pawn, but e6 is hanging, and you know, the point is, if the queen gets to e6 and the queen's involved in the defense, also going to attack the h6 pawn, this is a way of keeping the queen and the rook as well out of play, and just saying okay, you know. Now, yeah, I mean, one thing, of course, is that the knight on h4 is hanging, so g takes h4 is quite nasty. But then we have the gorgeous queen g2, bishop f6, and now can you maybe want to stop the video and just guess what happens? Not too tricky. Queen g7 check. Ah, takes, promote to a rook, of course, and then bishop f4, and you're threatening, well, bishop d6 checkmate, bishop h6 check, or rather bishop d6 with imminent checkmate, rather. Even bishop h6 is very dangerous, and of course the nicest idea would be e7, knight e7, and then bishop h6, which is really checkmate. So lots and lots of possibilities there, and if knight f4, then e7 is checkmate as well. Checkmate with a pawn in the middle game, always nice. So yeah, rook f6 was played by Leela. Again, not an obvious move, but this rook, because you're abandoning the defense of g5, but you're looking at going rook h6 or rook e6, and you're also covering g6 in case white wants to go knight g6. Rook takes g5 and rook e6, so Leela decides that the e6 pawn is the dangerous one. It's quite interesting. I'd need to have quite a good think about it to decide which pawn was more dangerous, but actually Leela seems to like this pawn on h6, not worried by rook g7 things coming in, and well, of course it's shielding the king from checks as well. And the key point about taking that pawn on e6 is what we said before. Now this queen is going to be able to come into play and defend the king side. But I mean, you know, if you showed me this position, I'd just assume that black was lost, and but the engines, you know, you just see the evaluation gradually heading back to 0-0. But still, there's a lot of danger here. So bishop g4 played. Bishop takes g5, winning the rook there. Bishop e6 and queen f8, and well, why did take the rook on g5 rather than play a move like rook e1? Well, obviously, you know, there's going to be concrete reasons for that, but in general, it's makes much more sense, and this would certainly be how I'd reason it, to remove a rook that's on g5 closer to my king rather than a rook on e1, unless there's some really concrete reasons. Then I'd rather, you know, you remove the piece that's the most active and you leave the opponent with a piece that's the relatively the least active. And well, the rook on e1 is doing less than the rook on g5. So queen f8, queen g4, queen f6. So black has managed to involve the queen in the defense, and well, by doing so as well, you're starting to see squares for the black rook on a8 to get involved. But this still looks, you know, absolutely appalling for black. Knight f3 coming into e5. We're now threatening knight f7 check, and now bishop g8 from black. Okay, covering f7, but now white's got another entry point. Knight g6 check, king h7 and bishop f5, and I mean, this is just teeing up everything. We've got, you know, discovered attacks here to all sorts of squares. I mean, surely this can't be possible for black. But actually, you know, the more you look at it, the more you realise that there's no actually decisive check yet. You know, so yeah, I mean, there's well, you know, does black have any time, anything that black can do in order to create some counterplay? And actually, a surprisingly powerful one. Black has this move knight e3. So you're forking these two, which is quite nice, because it just means a discovered check that isn't a double discovered check. You can just end up grabbing this bishop on f5. So bishop e3 played, fe3. But this move knight e3 has actually opened a couple of things. First of all, this pawn is a very nice distracting little thing. But secondly, we can play the bishop to d5 check, and actually that's a bit awkward for the king. If you move to the g file, then well, you're blocking the natural path of attack. If you move to h2, well, we've got all sorts of possibilities of checking the white king, and it's not that you're going to give checkmate, but it's just that you're going to force maybe some self-blocking moves from the white major pieces, and that will hopefully reduce the power of the attack. So, well, that's exactly what we see. Rook g1, bishop d5 check, king h2, and now no check yet from black, but the move e2. We're just trying to basically distract the pieces. So, you know, if you go, you can't go queen e2 here because queen f5 would be very, very dangerous indeed. Well, very dangerous, it would win a piece. But now there's some really bizarre moments here. I'm not gonna, you know, if I keep you in suspense about it all this while, then I think the video is going to end up being an hour and a half long if I try and explain absolutely everything. So I'll just cut to the chase, and I mean, you'll simply have to believe me. I spent ages trying to understand this. I mean, the key point is in this position that white does not have a decisive check. There's just no way to achieve this. Black's pieces are just covering enough all the time. And actually, if you were to say, you know, what is Black's next move going to be, a very high candidate would be to play the move. Would be to play the move B takes A4 here, grabbing an extra pawn and also exposing some of these pawns as well. And that possibility of B takes A4 is actually very often the difference between a winning position for white and just a 0.00. So, you know, essentially, if white just carries on attacking, at some stage, black will play B takes A4, and that will be that extra pawn, the weakness of the B2 and D4 pawns will be enough to give black equality. But if you go AB5, and if black plays the move AB5, then having included those, not losing that A pawn, that suddenly is giving white very, very good chances indeed. This is the line that you play H4, King G8, just getting out of that discovered attack. For the future, Knight E5 and then Queen H5, Rook A7 and Knight D7. And this position, Queen D6 check, we go King H3, Rook D7, Queen E8, picking it up like this. This position is pretty strong for white. All the engines were winning it. It's not obvious at all to me, but the engines were finding this move, Queen E2, with an extra pawn in the Queen and Bishop ending, because King F5 allows Queen F2 check. So I mean, we're getting, you know, like a real engine subtle. I don't think any human player could ever guess this at all. I mean, even with the benefit of GM hindsight, I wasn't really. I mean, I sort of guessed at the reason, but I didn't have any concrete understanding of why that would be. So after AB5, Leela played the move Queen G5. So not taking that pawn back on B5. But actually just trying to interfere with the white position and, offering the exchange of queens. Of course, you can't win a piece by taking on G5 because we've got E1 queen here. So Knight E7 check. You can't take the pawn on E2 yet because F5 is hanging. So you have to play this move Knight E7, Queen E2. But yeah, obviously the knight's moving a little bit away from the king there. And by playing Knight E7, you give black access to F4. So you give check. Rook G3, and you're forcing, it's what I said before, forcing a self-blocking move by the white major pieces. So, you know, that's quite nice because the rook won't be able to go with Rook G8 checkmate, for example. However, the big annoyance here is that you've got Knight G6 check, forking these two. And of course, you know, well, these there's still tension in these somehow. But Leela just played the move Bishop F7, covering the G6 square, making sure that the pin is kept intact, and not caring remotely that both of those pawns are hanging. Now, yeah, what's the point? Well, if you go BC6, I just go Rook E8, and I'm pinning you, and this is rather irritating. We've got moves like Bishop G5, for example, for black coming in when the knight will be lost. Yeah, the fact that this rook is pinned is very, very annoying. It interferes with all of white's freedom. So that isn't very dangerous. But Komodo took on the A6. You know, and the idea is if Rook E8, we just go A7. You couldn't play C7 before because the queen was covering it, but A7 you're not covering it. So yeah, now you're never going to be able to take on E7 because of A8 queen. So that's quite good. But black's got an unbelievably clever move. You might want to put the stop the video if you want to do a bit of guessing here, because black can actually just play the move rook takes a6, which is quite shocking. If queen a6, we go queen d2 check, and there's no way to get out of perpetual here, simply because queen f3, I go queen f4, and then I come back. King f1, I just keep on checking, well, queen d4 or whatever. King g2, queen d2. I mean, the key point is that after a move like queen d2 check, you can't play rook g2, because we can also get in moves like we'll also have moves like bishop f4 check, for example, and then you've really got to watch out at some stage. At some stage, this is going to get too dangerous for white. So there's nothing better than a perpetual check after queen takes a6. So yeah, and then another very interesting move, bishop e6, that was played by Stockfish a number of times. Black needs a very good move here, and obviously, you've got threats here. When you take on f7, the queen will be dragged away, which means the rook will no longer be pinned. But you've got this move rook a7 in this position. If bishop f7, we've got rook takes c7, and queen e7, queen f2, with just a draw by perpetual. Again, rook g2, bishop f4 check is not advisable. But you can go knight c6, and you're hitting the rook on a7. You're threatening bishop f7. This looks like complete disaster somehow. But black's got this lovely idea, bishop h5. If queen h5, again, you've got this move queen f2. Yeah, here rook g2, you can just go queen f4 check, which is just enough for the draw. That was how the engine draw ended. So bishop g4 played, and now rook g7, and well, black's 3 pawns down, which feels really awful. But the big problem is that this queen on f4 is so powerful, and the possibilities, if white's queen moves away, of giving perpetual checks are huge. For all that, I mean, if you showed me this position, I wouldn't guess that it should be 0.00 somehow. But the engines were managing to draw this with consummate ease. So I'll just show you a few little games there. Queen d6, threatening bishop f4 there. So king g2, queen takes d4. King h1 felt was necessary. Rook g5, not taking that pawn on b4. Rook g8, queen c6, bishop f4, queen c3. Takes. And yeah, the engines thought that this was drawn. Again, this is something I'd feel, well, rather nervous about claiming with black, and also nervous defending. But yeah, draw after draw after draw in my game, my many games. So yeah, I mean, this is again very much on engine terrain here, because I think that would be impossible for any human to guess. I mean, you might go for it saying, well, maybe I'll hold it, but you wouldn't guess that, oh yeah, that's correct, and it is completely holdable. The king g2 was played by Dragon, and now queen d2. That was yeah, maybe a slightly tamer move from Dragon there, just giving Leela the opportunity to exchange off everything. But again, we're heading to a pretty similar ending here, aren't we? We're heading to an ending here that is rook and 2 pawns for the yeah, two pawns rather extra, rook opposite coloured bishop, and 2 pawns against rook and bishop. I mean, the key thing is, of course, that this bishop is the wrong coloured rook pawn. So actually, all we need to do is we need to give this bishop up for the b pawn, and somehow exchange off rooks at the same time. Should be possible, and we've just got a clear draw. So actually, I think bishop d2 was the final move in the game, and a draw was agreed here. You're just stopping. I mean, you are just stopping the b pawn from advancing here, and yeah, I mean that should be enough to draw. But of course, I mean, if it was a human game, you'd definitely carry on for hundreds of moves here, because yeah, the chance of a mistake is always present with a human game. But the engines felt that they could defend that very easily, just with that bishop and wrong colours rook's pawn, and just that plan of giving up the bishop for this pawn, as long as you're exchanging off rooks as well. So there we are. That's a rather long video. I thought I'd do a little bit of a longer one, or I could do a bit of a longer one since I haven't posted for a few weeks. I've been travelling for business and also just working. I don't know how many nights a week, just for various things in IT land. Lots of security stuff. And even if you do it kind of perfectly yourself, you've still got all the worry of making sure that nothing got through. So yeah, been a lot of work recently, but hopefully be returning to doing some more videos. And I've got one big project that that'll be quite a few videos that I've got going at the moment. But yeah, it's going to be a little while to get that all up. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed this game, and hope you enjoyed seeing how engines are evolving, and actually quite significantly evolving. I think still in the strength of their play. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Do like this video, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement and Reengineering the Chess Classics. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you for the next videos. Thanks for watching.